Moments ago, as we saw, TNA founder Jeff Jarrett did it. He used his power. He stepped up to the plate.
Why did so many fans hate Mike Tenay's commentary? Well, it wasn't just about the way he called the matches. Though yeah, his style definitely rubbed people the wrong way. What really made things spicy was the behind-the-scenes tension, especially his drama with Tony Schiavone. And trust us, every story is juicier than the last. So let's not waste any time. Let's dive right into it. Let's start with Mike Tenay's time in WCW, particularly on Monday Nitro. Tenay was known as the Professor for a reason. He brought in-depth knowledge to every match he called. Whether it was a cruiserweight bout featuring Japanese or Mexican wrestlers, or a technical matchup between two ring veterans, Tenay could tell you who trained, who, what promotion they wrestled for last month, and even the name of a move you had never seen before. Now, for hardcore wrestling fans who loved the details and wanted to learn more, this was gold. But for the average viewer tuning in during the wild and unpredictable Monday Night Wars, his style felt off. While the rest of the broadcast team was focused on shouting, hyping up storylines, or throwing in snarky one-liners, Tenay was calmly breaking down a Fujiwara armbar or explaining the history of lucha libre. To some, this made him sound like the smartest guy in the room. To others, it just made him sound like a buzzkill. He didn't have that big personality that guys like Jim Ross or Bobby Heenan had. He didn't crack jokes like Jerry Lawler or throw fiery jabs like Jesse Ventura. Instead, Tenay focused on the nuts and bolts of wrestling. And while that was admirable, it didn't always fit with the over-the-top energy of late 90s wrestling television. Some fans called his commentary too analytical. Others went further, calling him dorky or just plain boring. And it wasn't just the fans. Even some of his colleagues seemed unsure how to work with him. One of the most noticeable dynamics on WCW Nitro was the tension between Tenay and lead announcer Tony Schiavone. If you were paying close attention, you'd notice that Tony would sometimes make sarcastic or dismissive comments toward Tenay on air. Maybe it was just meant as harmless ribbing, but Tenay never really fired back. He usually stayed quiet or tried to move past it, which made the whole thing feel a little awkward. That awkwardness didn't go unnoticed. Fans started speculating that there was real tension behind the scenes. While it's never been fully confirmed as a personal feud, there's plenty of talk that Tony Schiavone, who had close ties to WCW management, might not have always seen Tenay as an equal. Some even say Schiavone would occasionally hold back information from Tenay, making him look unprepared during live broadcasts. Now imagine being Tenay. You're already trying to bring a different kind of commentary to a show dominated by larger-than-life voices, and on top of that, the guy next to you might be subtly undermining you. It's no wonder that some viewers picked up on that weird energy and felt uncomfortable with the whole setup. To be fair, Tony Schiavone has since admitted that he wasn't always the nicest person during those WCW years. He said in interviews that he regrets how he treated certain colleagues, but he also points out that WCW was a stressful place, especially as the company started falling apart. The pressure, the chaos, the constant changes. It was a tough place to work, and maybe that explains some of the tension between him and Tenay. But Tenay's story doesn't end with WCW. After the company shut down, he found a new home in a rising promotion called TNA, now known as Impact Wrestling. And this is where things got interesting again. In TNA, Tenay became the voice of the show. He wasn't just a sidekick anymore. He was the lead guy. And for the first few years, his partnership with Don West was something special. Don was the complete opposite of Tenay, loud, emotional, over the top, and often clueless when it came to wrestling terms. But somehow it worked. Their contrast created a unique chemistry that fans actually loved. Don would scream in excitement, and Tenay would calmly explain what was going on. It felt fresh. It felt balanced. For a while, it seemed like Tenay had finally found his place. But then things started to change. As TNA went through one problem after another, bad creative decisions, talent leaving, management shakeups, and financial struggles, something seemed to change in Tenay too. His commentary lost the spark it once had. He started sounding less passionate, like he was just going through the motions. Some fans even said it felt like he was phoning it in. And honestly, who could blame him? TNA was falling apart, and he was still expected to carry the show with the same energy and excitement as before. That's not an easy thing to do, especially when you're surrounded by chaos behind the scenes. To make things worse, TNA started using Tenay in strange on-screen segments that didn't play to his strengths. Instead of letting him stick to what he did best, providing insight and structure, they put him in storylines that felt forced and awkward. It was like they didn't know what to do with him anymore. So by the time he stepped away from the commentary desk, many fans were left with mixed feelings. Some still respected him for his knowledge and the passion he brought during the good years. But others remembered the quieter, more monotone version of Tenay near the end of his run and judged him harshly. All right, now let's shift gears and take a closer look at Mike Tenay's career. It all started back in November 1994 when Tenay made his official WCW announcing debut. But it wasn't just any ordinary night. It was the When Worlds Collide pay-per-view, a co-promoted show between WCW and Mexico's A.A promotion. Here's where things get interesting. Apparently, every regular WCW announcer, including lead man Tony Schiavone, turned down the chance to call the event. Maybe they didn't see the value in it. Maybe they weren't familiar enough with Lucha Libre. Whatever the reason, they passed, and Mike Tenay stepped up. Tenay, who had built a reputation behind the scenes for his deep wrestling knowledge, got the nod to join Chris Cruz on commentary for that night. And let's just say, they struck gold. The main event of the show featured Los Gringos Locos, Eddie Guerrero and Art Barr, against the legendary Hijo del Santo and Octagon. It wasn't just a good match, it was a classic. In fact, the Wrestling Observer newsletter later gave it a rare 5-star rating, calling it legendary. Tenay's play-by-play work that night helped introduce many American fans to the world of Lucha Libre, and people started paying attention to him. Thanks to the success of When Worlds Collide, WCW began adding more luchadors to their roster, guys like Rey Mysterio Jr., Psychosis, and Juventud Guerrera. And who better to explain their styles, holds, and moves than Mike Tenay? He became the go-to guy for calling cruiserweight matches on pay-per-views. Fans might not have known what a corkscrew plancha was, but Tenay did, and he made sure you knew too. That part-time role eventually grew into something more. Tenay started showing up regularly on WCW's secondary shows like WCW Worldwide and WCW Saturday Night. It was on these programs that he really started getting noticed. Known as Iron Mike Tenay, he quickly developed a reputation as one of the smartest, most well-prepared voices in wrestling. He was also given backstage duties, conducting interviews at events like Uncensored 1995. But the big leap came on September 2nd, 1996. That's when Tenay was added to the main broadcast team on WCW Monday Nitro, joining Tony Schiavone and Bobby the Brain Heenan at the announcer's desk. Suddenly, he wasn't just a guest voice. He was front and center on one of the hottest wrestling shows in the world. It was during this time that Schiavone gave him the nickname the Professor, a nod to Tenay's unmatched knowledge of wrestling history, ring psychology, and technical moves. And honestly, it fit him perfectly. Tenay was the kind of guy who treated wrestling like a serious sport. He gave context to every match, talked about each wrestler's background, and explained why certain holds mattered. It gave fans a deeper understanding of what they were watching, even if it wasn't always delivered with the same fire as his partners. As WCW continued to expand its programming, they launched a second major weekly show called WCW Thunder. With Nitro already keeping Schiavone and Heenan busy, Tenay was promoted to lead announcer for Thunder. This was a big deal. It showed that WCW trusted him to carry an entire show, and he did just that, week after week. He remained with WCW in this role until the company was bought out by the WWF in 2001. When WCW closed its doors, many announcers and wrestlers scrambled to find work. Some went to WWF, others faded into the background. But Mike Tenay didn't disappear for long. In early 2002, Jeff Jarrett reached out to him about becoming the play-by-play voice for a brand new promotion called Total Nonstop Action Wrestling, or TNA. Tenay jumped on board, and when TNA launched in June 2002, there he was, now dressed in a tuxedo, calling every match with the same passion and detail fans had come to expect from him. From that point on, he became the official voice of TNA. He called every weekly pay-per-view event, every episode of Impact Wrestling, and every single monthly pay-per-view until 2015. That's a long run. But Tenay didn't just stay behind the mic. As TNA grew, his role behind the scenes grew too. In 2005, when the company decided to switch to a booking committee format, Tenay was invited to be part of that team. It gave him more influence on the product, something he'd never really had in WCW. On camera, he also started doing more. He conducted serious sit-down interviews with top stars like Jeff Jarrett, and he was often the guy who made big announcements, like when Sting signed with the company. But all good runs eventually slow down. In 2015, after TNA moved from Spike TV to Destination America, Josh Matthews was brought in to replace Tenay as the main commentator. Tenay was given a new role hosting a short-lived show called Impact Wrestling, unlocked, but it didn't last. After that, he only made occasional appearances, doing backstage interviews or filling in when needed. He did, however, get the honor of inducting Jeff Jarrett into the TNA Hall of Fame, a sign of the respect he still had from the company's biggest names. By the end of 2015, Tenay was still technically employed by TNA, but he hadn't been on TV in months. And when Impact Wrestling moved to the Pop TV network in January 2016, Tenay confirmed what many had already guessed. His future with the show was unclear. A few months later, in June 2016, he appeared on Jim Ross's podcast, The Ross Report, and quietly announced that he had officially left TNA and was stepping away from the wrestling business altogether. But his story doesn't quite end there. On September 8, 2023, during Impact's Victory Road event, the company announced that Mike Tenay, along with his longtime commentary partner, Don West, would be inducted into the Impact Wrestling Hall of Fame. It was a moment of recognition for the duo who had carried the soundtrack of TNA through its most memorable years. Their chemistry, passion, and dedication helped define an era for a generation of fans. And that wraps up today's video. Make sure to hit like and subscribe so you never miss out on future updates.